Assalamu alaikum, everyone. Welcome to this series on Hajj of the Heart. And we're here with Dr. Aslam Abdullah, who is guiding us through these first 10 days of Dhul Hijjah and talking about the essence of Hajj, the history of Hajj. And today he has another episode on the history of Hajj that he'll be sharing with us. Dr. Aslam, assalamu alaikum.
Wa alaikum assalam wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuhu, and thank you very much for hosting this program. If there is no question from any of the audience from the previous lectures, then I would immediately go into the subject of today, and that is the travels of Ibn Jubayr to Mecca. Ibn Jubayr was born in Valencia, Spain in 1145. He died in 1217. And at the age of 38, he went to Mecca to perform Hajj. He was a very learned person, and he was also the secretary to the Al-Muahad governor of Granada. And his travels are captured in his book, which is called Rahla, or the Travel of Ibn Jubayr. And it's very interesting to learn the reasons of his travel to Hajj. When he was the secretary at Al-Muahid in Granada, the ruler of Granada in 1182 forced him to drink 7 cups of wine. Otherwise, he was threatened with serious consequences. So Ibn Jubayr drank those 7 cups, and then later rulers realized his wrongdoing, and then he gave Ibn Jubayr 7 cups of golden dinars. But Ibn Jubayr, even though he was forced to drink, was in a state of remorse and repentance, and to expiate his act, he decided to go to Mecca to perform the Hajj. And on February 3rd, 1183, accompanied by a physician, he left from the city and started his journey to Mecca. That was in 1183. Ibn Jubayr left Granada, crossed over to the Strait of Gibraltar to Ceuta. Then under that was under the Muslim rule. He boarded a ship on February 24th, 1183, and set sail for Alexandria. That is in Egypt. A sea journey took him past the Balearic Islands, and then across to the west coast of Sardinia. While offshore, he heard the news that 80 Muslim men, women, and children who were abducted from North Africa were being sold as slave, and then he boarded the ship, and he then spent time in Alexandria. I mean, he reached Alexandria on March 26th. He started from Granada on February 3rd and reached Alexandria March 26th almost month and a half or 3 weeks. I mean, imagine the kind of hardship people used to take at that particular time. Salahuddin was at the helm of the affairs, and he was the ruler. And Ibn Jubayr narrates that everywhere that he traveled in Egypt, he was full. He found that the people were in praise of Salahuddin, and he was also in praise for him for the administration and for his rule. This is what he wrote. That's Ibn Jubayr writing about Salahuddin, that there is no congregational or ordinary mosque, no mausoleum built over a grave, nor hospital, nor theological college where the country of Sultan, bounty of the Sultan, does not extend to all who seek shelter or live in them. He points out that when the Nile does not flood enough, Salahuddin remits the land tax from the farmers. He also said that such is his justice and the safety he has brought to his high roads that men in his lands can go about their affairs by night and they would not be afraid of anything. And in Cairo, then he went to Cairo. From there, Ibn Jubayr notes that there are colleges and hostels erected for students and pious men of their lands by Salahuddin Ayyubi. In those colleges, the students find lodging and tutors to teach them the sciences they desire, and also allowances to cover their needs. The care of the Sultan also grants them baths, hospitals, and the appointment of doctors who can even come to visit them at their place of stay and who would be answerable for their cure. One of the Sultan's other generous act was that every day 2,000 loaves of bread were distributed to the poor every day. Also impressing Ibn Jubayr in that city was the number of mosques that were estimated to be approximately 12,000, often 4 or 5 of them in one street. Now, Ibn Jubayr also writes that when he landed in Alexandria, the custom officials, nothing unusual, insisted on taking zakat from the pilgrims, regardless of whether they were eligible to pay or not. In the city, he visited the lighthouse of Alexandria, which at the time was still standing, and he was amazed by its size and its splendor. He writes that one of the greatest wonders that we saw in the city was the lighthouse which great and glorious God had erected by the hands of those who were forced to such labor as indeed in that are signs for those who deserve, and as a guide to voyagers, for without it they would not be able to find true course to Alexandria. It can be seen for more than 70 miles and is of great antiquity. It is most strongly built in all directions and completes with the skies in height. Description of it falls short. The eye fails to comprehend it, and words are inadequate. So vast is the spectacle. He was also impressed by the free colleges, hostels for foreign students, baths and hospitals in the city. These were paid by awqaf and taxes on the city's citizens. He noted that there were between 8,000, as mentioned, centers of excellence, besides the masajid there. So he spent 8 days in Alexandria, and then he went to Cairo, and he notes that he traveled 3 days to reach Cairo. In the city, he visited the cemetery of Al-Qarafa, which contained the graves of many important figures in the history of Islam. And he noted while in the Cairo of Salahuddin, the walls of the citadel were being extended by the Mamluks with the object of reinforcing the entire city from any future Crusader attack. Another building work that he saw was in construction was a bridge over Nile, which would be high enough not to be submerged in the annual flooding of the river. He saw a spacious free hospital, which was divided into 3 sections, one each for men, women, and the third one was for insane. He saw the pyramids. Although he was unaware of who they had been built for, and the Sphinx, he also saw a device that was used for measuring the height of the Nile flood. Ibn Jubayr then traveled to Medina, Mecca, and from there to Damascus, to Mosul, and Baghdad. And he then also went to Sicily, which was taken over by the Christians 100 years ago. And he described the culture of Sicily, which he said was influenced by the Muslims. Then, after this travels, he also traveled to the east on 2 further occasions, 1189 and 1217. And he died in 1217 in Alexandria during the second of his trips there. Now, Ibn Jubayr's chronicle served as a model for later authors and travelers, and many of them copied from it without attribution. Ibn Juzay, who wrote the ancient account of Ibn Battuta's travels, whose travels were around 1355, and he copied passages from Ibn Jubayr's work, describing Damascus, Mecca, Medina, and other places in the Middle East. Passages copied from Ibn Jubayr are also found in the writings of Al-Sharishi and Al-Abdari and Al-Maqrizi. So plagiarism was quite common even at that particular time by these authors and by these scholars. So he says that the annual caravans set out from major cities on the Hajj pilgrimage to Mecca are huge moving towns under the leadership of an emir or a governor, or with guards, guides, merchants, craftspersons, doctors, and members of all social professions. The Hajj caravan traveled well-known routes with necessary infrastructure to supply them with food, water, and shelter. They resembled a large fair that provided less essential goods and services. The Hajj was thus a significant stimulus to travel, trade, and migration, as well as the diffusion of produce, ideas, technologies across land and waters routes of Asia, Africa, and Europe. Now, you would notice one thing, that the travel to Hajj was the catalyst for change in the Muslim world. As we talked about 3 or 4 days ago, that the Hujjaj would come from different parts of the world, and each country's pilgrims bring their own crafts, their own skills, their own knowledge, and their own experimentation in reconstructing their societies. And those ideas would be exchanged during their stay in Mina, and during standing in Arafat, and during their stay in Mecca. And then they would go back with new ideas and fresh technologies and fresh products. with relationship that would enhance trade, that would enhance exchange of goods and all those kind of things. So Hajj was really not only a spiritual journey in areas in that sense of the term, but also a stimulus and a catalyst for bringing about speedy changes on an annual and regular basis within Muslim communities and Muslim society. Something that we would find taking place in Europe and the United States at least 1,000 years after that practice began. So this is how basically it was happening. So the Hajj was then a significant stimulus to travel, trade, and migration, as well as diffusion of products, ideas, technologies across land and water routes of Asia, Africa, and parts of Europe, and also, as we discovered from the description of George Sandys from the Americas as well. So Ibn Jubayr was an excellent observer, and he captured the ironies of life during warfare and significant change that he observed on his way. So he writes that this assembly of, he talks about the Iraqis who are in the Hajj, that this assembly of Iraqis, together with the people from Khorasan, Mosul, and other lands, who were united in the company of the Amir of the pilgrimage, formed a multitude whose number only God Most High could count. The vast plain was teeming with them, and the far extending desert could barely contain them. You could see the earth shake giddily because of them and form waves through a great number. You might behold them as a sea of sullen billows. Its waters the mirage, its ships the mounds, and its sails the raised canopies and tents. Like piled up clouds, they moved along, commingling with each other and brushing against each other's sides. Upon the white desert plain, you would observe such a throng as would fill you with fear and alarm. With the desert plain, you would observe such a throng as uh, would fill you with fear and alarm, with the collision of the wood of the litters beating against each other. He who has not witnessed this journeying of the Iraqis has not seen one of those wonders of time, and they are discussed among men and that beguile listeners by their strangeness. Power and strength belong to God. It is enough to tell you that should one who has a station in this encampment go forth on any need and leave no sign to guide him back to his location, he will go astray and exhausted, wander crying amongst the number of lost. At times, the situation will compel such a one to repair to the pavilion of the emir and raise the matter to him. He will instruct one of his heralds to give out a proclamation and direct one of its public criers appointed for the purpose of taking the man behind him to on his camel and tour with that throughout the camp. He will have given his name and those of his camel master and of the land from where he came to the carrier, who then will raise his voice in the notice of his lost one, calling out the name of the camel master and of his country until he comes upon him and delivers the man to him. He's talking about the people who are lost during the Hajj. And he's saying that the Emir of the camp of Iraq would appoint, had certain people appointed for that particular purpose to take this man and from camps to camps, tents to tents, and announcing his name and his station, his city, and his group until he's found. Were this not done, he would never meet his companion again unless he met him unawares or came upon him in some chance together. So you can imagine how many people were present in Hajj during that particular time, which Jubair is describing. It is one of the amazing features of this caravan, whose marvels are such that description cannot comprehend them. Its members possess such wealth and resources to help them all they will need upon their way. Possessions are in the hand of God, and who grants them to whosoever he wills. So the people were coming there coming with tremendous resources, and they were basically spending all that they were bringing to be given to the poor and the needy. And then he further says that each year these ladies, the princes, do not themselves perform the pilgrimage, they dispatch with trusted men some water-bearing camels that quench the thirst of the travelers from the pilgrim roads. So the Muslim women, if they were unable to perform the Hajj, then they would make sure that they send provisions for the people who are there. They do this in places where water is known to be throughout the road, on Arafat and in the sacred mosques, each day and night. For this, their reward in heaven shall be great from God alone. Assistant comes, exalted in his majesty. You will hear the crier with the water camels announcing with a loud voice that the free water, and those whose store has been exhausted will hasten to him with their water skins and cups that they may fill them. With all this is breathing, the crier will proclaim, God preserve the ladies, daughter of kings, or daughter of these people, or daughter of that Amir, or daughter of that individual, and consequently extolling them and announcing their names and making known their good deeds and bringing the people to offer prayers for her. God will not fail to reward her good works and deeds. So, the acknowledging the good deeds of women was part of the Hajj tradition, and everywhere the caravan would. He further says that among the remarkable features of this caravan is that despite its size and magnitude, for indeed it's a bird of its own, when its baggage, being unladen, camping site adopted the Amir's drum, which they call kus, is beaten as a signal for departure. Not a moment will pass between the saddling and loading of the camels and mounting, and the drummers will scarce have made this third beat when the beat will have taken their way. All this comes from the careful preparations and diligent precautions taken by the travelers. Power and strength, Ibn Jubayr writes, belong to God alone. There is no God but He. So he's intermingling the Quranic verses with his description. And then he would say that by night they march by lighted torches held in the hands of footmen, and you can see no litter that is not led by one, so that the people march between wandering stars that line the darkness of the night, while the earth vies in its splendor with the stars of the sky. And then he says that the worldly conveniences and the requisites of animal satisfaction all were present in this nothing lacking caravan. Long it would take to describe it, and its story cannot all be embraced. Ibn Jubair is giving an insight into what is happening. He is then describing that how the state would ensure the safety and the protection of those people who are traveling from different. The description of the health care system of thousands of those people who are working 30 or 40 days with mobile hospitals is amazing. It's amazing. You know, we hear that the medical tents are built by armies in a day, in a couple of days these days, with all this kind of technologies that we have. But imagine, hundreds and thousands of people are marching, and then a hospital, not just one, clinics, uh, you know, assigned to each segment of the caravan with the supplies of medicine, that how they would preserve the medicine in a scorching heat. I mean, it is mind-boggling. It is mind-boggling that how concerned the people were and how dedicated they were. And then he would also describe that how many people would perish during this journey, and they would be buried, the place where they have. So the caravans that came from Damascus or Istanbul or Cairo or Baghdad, and even from elsewhere and joined these 30 caravans, have the footprints of a dedicated community and a dedicated people who are willing to offer everything that they have for the cause of God Almighty. أقول قولي هذا وأستغفر الله لي ولكم.
Thank you, Dr. Aslam, for that very illuminating this description of the travels of Ibn Jubayr. I was reading, so he traveled around, his travels are around 1183, so the 12th
Yes,
century.
he started in 1183.
And that's like within 50 years after the Second Crusade also. So
Yes.
When he was traveling, it was during times of war between Muslims and Christians.
Indeed. He also went to Palestine, and there he talks about the status of the Muslim community. That was a prosperous community at that particular time.
In one section, he's describing that although there's war going on between Muslims and Christians, but yet there is social interaction and marriages taking place between Muslims and Christians. And he says that the soldiers fight and the citizens are at peace with each other.
Indeed. Absolutely. And then he also talks about a number of non-Muslims who also joined the caravans to go to Hajj. And that is quite fascinating. That, as we saw yesterday, that Guru Nanak was in Mecca, at least 400 years after, Ibn Jubayr. But even in the 12th century, Ibn Jubayr mentioned the presence of a good number of Christians in the caravan. What did they go to observe? Did they go to perform Hajj? He did not elaborate, but they were there.
And his travels, did it overlap also the incidences of the Karamateins, the people who were the rejectors and the people who stole the black stone?
Yeah, but the Karamateins
overlap?
No, Karamateins incident took place in 930, 200 years before. At least 200
quite
years.
Before that, yes.
Yeah, before that. And I think 938, Abbasid caliphs brought it back.
Okay, excellent. Well, again, thank you so much for giving us.
Oh, wonderful. We will inshallah tomorrow focus on Ibn Battuta. And then, finally on the next day, we will touch upon Begum Bhopal. And you told me that you are also reading the Queen of Bhopal's travelogue. So I hope that you would also share your reading. You would also share your reading because.
Yes, I just started reading that. If I get far enough, definitely I would love
No,
to
whatever,
share.
inshallah, your description
Yes,
is, that would be fantastic. And then we will have what we call the Muhammad Asad's uh, journey,
road to Makkah.
road to Mecca. And then finally, we'll talk about the final session will be on sacrificing animals and different opinions that exist within the Muslim community on that, inshallah. So thank you very much once
Inshallah.
again, and please,
Thank you.
to the audience, I request that have a look at Ibn Jubayr and Ibn Battuta's books. And I think IslamiCity has those books available. And you must have a copy of that at your homes to read it, because it is so inspiring, to see how the life was in the 11th, 12th, 18th, 16th century, and how the Muslims interacted and created a people-based civilization, which contributed to the development of the world as a whole, not just Muslims.
Absolutely. That's a very good lesson for all of us to learn. That it was not easy during that time to travel, but
It
for
is.
these people, it was part of their faith.
Yes, it
To
was
go
part of.
out, look
Yes,
for
it is right.
knowledge and gain experience, interact with people. So if you see that they were all motivated, and their first journeys were to Makkah, for
Yes,
pilgrimage, and it was
yes,
start of their basically the learning process.
indeed. So, inshallah, let us make the dua. أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. والعصر إن الإنسان لفي خسر إلا الذين آمنوا وعملوا الصالحات وتواصوا بالحق وتواصوا بالصبر. والله سبحانه وتعالى grant us your mercy and inspire us to be like those people who are closer to you. سبحان ربك رب العزة عما يصفون وسلام على المرسلين والحمد لله رب العالمين. Thank you very much, sir.